But yeah, all right, Richie, welcome along to the Better Dads Club. Thank you for joining me today. I'm excited to have this conversation with you. Just for those people that don't know who you are you? What do you do? What lights you up?
Hi, thanks for talking to me, Tom. Nice to see you again. It's been a minute.
You too. Yeah.
Who am I? That's always a good question. I'm always self-evaluating. What's easier is to say what I do. Own a Muay Thai gym. I apologize for the sound in the background. One of my coaches is training someone, but I own a Muay Thai gym. I train fighters. I train people for general fitness. In the daytime, we run programs for alternative education, kids who are outside of mainstream school, and we use martial arts as part of their life skills development journey, I suppose. I work with people who are in the Grace Foundation, which is the country's biggest provider of bail and rehabilitative services to folks who are potentially going to prison or have just come out of prison. I'm an educator, consultant, and public speaker, so I do have a private practice and work in schools or with different governmental organizations, non-governmental organizations, discussing these interconnected issues of like masculinity, what that is, our conceptions around it, how that plays out, mental health, suicide prevention, pornography, sexual violence prevention, domestic violence prevention. And alongside that, I'm a husband and a father, which also, I guess, further informs my work, the personal is political. So, I guess I'm always trying to, walk the talk.
Right on. And how did you get to where you are?
Man, it's been quite a long organic journey.
Mm.
Career-wise, how did I get to this career? So I've been doing this for about the last 10 years. Prior to this, I worked in community alcohol and drug harm prevention through a Ministry of Health project called CAID, Community Action Youth and Drugs, that contract sit at Auckland Council. So I work with lots of different minority communities. So I used to work with the LGBT community here in Auckland, and, they would have an event. How do you help them facilitate that event so it's alcohol and drug free, and provide them with funding and sponsorship and stuff, or promote what they're doing. I used to work with university environments. We know that young people in university settings are at a higher likelihood of abusing substances, but young women in, say, campus situations or campus accommodation are statistically at a higher likelihood of experiencing sexual assault. And so we would organize, say, trainings with local organizations like Rape Prevention Education to help with education to mitigate those sorts of things. And I was just sort of talking about my own journey of unpacking my own, in hindsight, masculinity, my own education around sex and sexuality. And I would just talk about that stuff online, like we all do. But I was doing it first on message boards because I'm old, but like static message boards before social media was a thing. Mm-hmm. And then Facebook came about, and I would just be discussing these sorts of things as I was organically learning them. And the New Zealand Ministry of Social Development got in touch, and that was maybe 13, 14 years ago, and asked me to start doing more formal work around initially bystander intervention. How do you get boys and men to interrupt sexual violence situations? Say you're at a bar and you see someone looks like they might be being like creeped on. How do you get involved in that? How do you go talk to the barkeeper or the bouncer or interrupt the situation? There's a range of different modalities around that you can encourage people to participate in, and they want me to be the face of it. Because I used to be a professional Muay Thai fighter. So when I was younger, I guess I looked kind of stereotypically masculine and quote unquote tough, but would talk, I guess, feminist-informed issues. And so they kind of bridge those two things to how do you talk to boys and men about this? Because I still think we don't do a very good job of that. And that's kind of how the work evolved. And at the same time, I was doing like advocacy work for an organization that doesn't really operate in New Zealand anymore called White Ribbon. It's an international organization tasked with helping men end men's violence towards women. I was on the board at a local organization called RPE, Rape Prevention Education, and just it all evolved until I decided to sort of quit my council job and go out on my own. People were like, yo, man, will you come speak at our school? And I was like, okay, sure, I'll give it a go. And it's just evolved off like taking a selfie and like, talk to 500 kids today. And other people got in touch, and I decided to go back to university to, I guess, augment my academic knowledge on top of the professional and personal experiences that I've had. So I went back and did my master's degree in 2020 in sociology, looking at specifically masculinity and because our social constructions and ideas around what it means to be a man do contribute to these issues, whether it's suicide or men's violence or substance abuse. This is not a sole causative, but it is a contributing factor that we actually have some leverage over. Something we can actually change societally, individually, culturally, in the whānau. And I guess underneath all of that, yeah, like, millions of kids all around the world, I had a kind of dysfunctional childhood. My dad struggled with his own issues, and he grew up in the era where we didn't talk about mental health or trauma and how do you unpack that. And my father has serious alcoholism, and I had a pretty adverse childhood due to that. I love my dad, and we're definitely not as close as sadly I'd like to be. But he did his best with what he could. But unfortunately, a lot of the time it wasn't particularly stable or safe, and it's something that I carry into my work, but also now that I'm a father myself, into my own role as a father.
Can you unpack that a little bit in terms of your upbringing and the work that you're doing, like with fighting being such a big part of your life? Did that come from that background?
Yeah, well, actually, I asked my dad in my late 30s, like, how come you took me to Taekwondo? That was my first martial art. It's my Taekwondo black belt here,
Right on.
which I did from 13 years old to 18 years old. And my dad got sober when I was 10 for the first time, and then he would relapse a few years later. But I think when I was 13, he took me up to the local community center and acknowledged to the Taekwondo instructor, hey, my son's kind of struggling with his self-esteem. He said, I'm not doing the best job as a dad. Can you help out my boy? Which is actually a really hard thing for any man to admit to another man, So I do really appreciate that, because the slogan of my gym that I'm sitting in is fighting to have my life, and that it's kind of true. Like, I grew up in West Auckland in the 1990s, 1980s. A lot of fighting, a lot of alcohol abuse of the boys that I hung out with, the girls I hung out with, a lot of, heavy drug use, or the people that I found myself gravitating towards. And martial arts gave me the self-esteem and self-confidence and self-discipline over time to say no to all those sorts of things. Alongside, I did find myself in an alternative music culture. I found myself in the hardcore scene by 16, 17, 18, and the whole straight edge movement was like this underground scene that emanated from America.
Can you talk about for those who don't know what straight edge is, and myself included?
Yeah, so there was a band called Minor Threat, who were like a hardcore punk band out of Washington, D.C., and the singer Ian McKay realized that if to be punk rock is to be counterculture, what's more counterculture than choosing sobriety by choice? If all the jocks and the cool kids are doing drugs and getting wasted, and it's rebellious to choose sobriety, and to have a sober mind allows you to be a better political activist and a better, more engaged human being, to reject the cultural norms that we all live under, And he wrote this song, and it was like, don't drive, don't smoke, don't drink, at least I can fucking think. And as a kid who grew up in an alcoholic family with like police visits, and I go to parties at 15, 16, and there's like really serious violence around me, and I would get involved in. And looking back now, I'm like, whoa, I saw some stuff. And then to have older, cooler guys who didn't live in West Auckland, who lived in the central city, who played in like their own bands, who'd been to America, which was like a big deal back then, was cool. And these older dudes who were like, yeah, drinking's whack. And I was like, oh yeah, drinking is whack. And I would experiment with drinking and, do dumb, embarrassing stuff. Nothing terrible, but, vomit or like kiss the wrong person or just say something stupid. Yeah, I would invariably very rarely drink, like 3 or 4 times a year, quite literally, up until I was 27. And then I decided to like claim straight edge. It's like, yeah, actually, I never really resonated with this alcohol culture that I've grown up in. And yeah, I'm sober by choice rather than necessity. A lot of people presume, because of what I talk about and how I look, that I'm like an alcoholic in recovery or a drug addict in recovery or a Mormon. I'm none of that. I'm none of those things. And so I just really have stuck with that, and that filters through to the work I do with youth now. I work with like high risk young offenders now, and I don't tell them don't drink, don't do drugs, but I ask them like, where have you seen alcohol and drugs take your whānau or your ainga or your family? Where have you seen alcohol and drugs like make anyone's life better? They're pretty self-reflective if you ask them in the right tone,
Getting the right questions across.
Well, that's what I've learned. Like when I was a young activist, I was a dickhead. Like lots of young activists continue to be now. You're like preachy and judgmental and self-righteous, and your unhealed trauma and your unhealed issues create like a bias and a lens through which you experience the world that makes you make a lot of noise, but doesn't make you a particularly effective change maker. You get a lot of attention, but you don't actually get a lot of traction. And so when I was young, like I was that guy on like first, like Facebook, like I said, with these kind of like feminist informed ideas, and I built like an audience of, it just becomes like this big circle jerk. It's a whole bunch of people who already agree with you and not actually doing the work. Like doing the work is talking to someone who doesn't agree with you, or who, I work with people who now have perpetrated serious violence, allegedly murdered people, who have allegedly assaulted or raped people, who have imported ridiculous amounts of drugs, and you actually have to sit and hold grace for how they got to where they are and what was the life path that led them to cause that harm and do that violence, and help them question and reflect through like motivational conversations and compassion. And that doesn't mean you're holding it to account or excusing it, but actually have to be able to help someone explain their own whakapapa and how that shows up in their life, and how that shows up in the life of the people around them in the society they live in. And I didn't do that when I was young because I didn't know. I was just like a young, angry kid who had a fucked up childhood, who listened to music that was about like being a better person, but that was also very angry. And often you have to temper your anger if you want to help people shift their perspectives. And so that's what I've done as I've got older, as I've moved from being an activist, talking about things and yelling about things online and offline, to actually working in difficult spaces with people who've caused real tangible harm. Not someone who's like said the wrong thing on the internet, who's got the wrong ideas, but who's actually like, I don't know, shot someone or stabbed someone. Or
taking some action.
Yeah, like it's like you actually have to hold grace for that and meet them where they are.
So in terms of your background and growing up, it sounds like everything that you've described there, it can be a very closed community. What do you think is the reason of how you didn't end up repeating those patterns, and how you've actually come to break those patterns? Like, do you think that that's an innate thing internally within you? Or
definitely not an innate thing. Although I've always been quite contrarian. I'm always like, look around, what's everyone else doing? Nah, that's lame. I'm quite happy to be different, I guess, which can be quite socially isolating. But I do guess like my life experience has given me, I don't care if I don't fit in, I suppose. And what I found was a community of people who also didn't mind if they didn't fit in through punk rock and hardcore music, right? And we kind of were quite happy we're quite proud in being different. And when you're a 19-year-old, 20-year-old in New Zealand and you decide to be a vegetarian who doesn't drink much, or you quit drinking in your mid-20s and you start boycotting different brands and products and choosing to go against cultural norms, you're definitely the odd one out, right? Like we live in a culture which is very conformist. That's not just Aotearoa, but that's the world generally. Although I do think if I lived in like LA or maybe Melbourne or something, there's a bigger counterculture. There's a bigger alternative culture. You're kind of like less at odds with everyone.
do you think that if you were in that environment that you would have swung the other way, being anti the
Yeah, definitely. I think so. I mean, if I'd had the same life experiences, when I was 19, I flew to New York for 3 months just to hang out in the hardcore scene. Like I loved hardcore and I loved the counterculture that much. I love the music. I love the message. I love songs about rejecting animal cruelty, women's rights. I didn't listen to music for fun necessarily, although it was fun. I love jumping off stages and like slam dancing and moshing. But I loved like the culture and community around it, of people who are quite happy to reject things on a certain cultural level. That was cool. It was empowering. And it gave me the self-confidence and the self-esteem and I guess ability to, go against the grain about what a lot of the stuff around me are seeing, alongside the internal, I guess, fortitude that I think I developed through martial arts to say no. Like, I always remember being 15 years old, me and my friends were walking through like the graveyard, the cemetery where people would go to drink and smoke weed. And, my dad was in the middle of a relapse and my household was really chaotic. And my friends started drinking and smoking weed and offered me, I don't know, 40 ounces or something. And I was like, nah, I don't want to do that because I equated chaos at my home with alcohol. And so I think martial arts started making me value myself. Like when you love yourself and value yourself, which has been a lifelong journey for me, you do start treating yourself better. And I'm grateful to, I guess, have developed some self-worth through the effort that hard martial practice required of you, Like I started doing Taekwondo and in a few months I had my first semi-contact competitive fight, which I lost, but I loved it, like I remember getting like primary school fights, someone was mean, so I'd throw a punch at them, whatever, right? So you have this unregulated nervous system and your fight or flight responses for me was always like, oh, just swing on someone, see how that goes, and you don't always win, but pretty quickly you learn that people aren't going to tease you for reading books or being different if you punch them or try to punch them, even if they punch you back, which isn't healthy, right? But that was my sort of go-to. And then having that energy and having martial arts to put that energy into and give it direction, my instincts became a constructive pathway rather than a destructive pathway, was a real blessing. And that's kind of what I talk about. Yesterday I was working with a bunch of quite high-risk young people who are in like a rehabilitative system. And I'm like, yo, all you guys have got athletic ability, man. Like, you guys got hands, you guys can box. Don't go out and think that it's cool to like step out some poor random dude or use this for the wrong reasons. Like, go get your money boxing or go join a Muay Thai gym or MMA gym. That's a really healthy, constructive pathway for you that will give you purpose, connection, community. It'll encourage you to stay away from substances for your physical well-being so you can perform in sport. It will give you goal-setting ability. It'll teach you about exercise, like running and weightlifting, and these things are like really good for our mental well-being. Like the byproduct of that lifestyle is better mental well-being. When you have better mental well-being, a lot of the time you don't use alcohol and drugs as coping. You don't resort to violence as an explosion, And also
it does seem it does seem a little bit counterintuitive as far as you're working with these high risk individuals or people that have, as you say, quite rather large acts of violence, and then now you're taking them and bringing them into a fighting environment. So how do you see that, or how is that playing out in the real world? Because obviously I'm sure there's people out there, myself included, or definitely my mother, for example, who would always kind of be like, oh, fighting's fighting and fighting's just bad. But then I'd sit down with my dad and we'd watch Mike Tyson on the TV or whatever. And so how does the training and the discipline, how is that supporting these guys with their rehabilitation if they've come from violent backgrounds?
Well, there's a huge difference between street violence or family violence and violence in sport. Like street violence and family violence is often reactive and comes from a place of a dysregulated nervous system and bad synaptic wiring. Like, so if you grow up in an adverse environment, poverty, family violence, exposure to family violence, substance abuse, gestational exposure to substance abuse. So from the womb, your brain is affected by your mother's ingestion of psychoactive substances. You don't pause to think about exploding and being violent, right? Like that's just not how the brain works. You're the in best case scenario, people's frontal cortex, like the part of the brain that makes weighed out logical rational decisions for boys and men, doesn't finish developing till you're about 25. And that's much later, and it's impaired if you're exposed to these sorts of environments and substance abuse, right? Like if you're drinking and smoking cannabis heavily from 10 years old, like some of the kids I work with, like your brain's just not operating at the same level. So you're far more likely to explode, and violence can be part of that explosion, right? And that means you like pick up a knife or a bottle or drive your car into someone or, push your partner or whatever it is. And none of that's acceptable. It all needs to be held to account. But you can't just tell people not to do that when they've got very real drivers behind that. You actually have to work with them. And a lot of boys and men don't want to sit down and have a face-to-face conversation with some therapist straight up. Eventually they might get there. But when you bring them into an environment that actually is attractive to them, a Muay Thai gym or a kickboxing gym or a boxing gym, and you start having therapeutic conversations shoulder to shoulder rather than face to face, in my experience of doing it for nearly a decade, they're actually really ready to have it. I got to sit down with 10 guys on e-bail bracelets. I'm up for a really serious charge the other day, and talk about how homophobia is a prison. Because when we can't talk about our feelings because we're scared of being seen as feminine or gay, we repress our feelings, and those feelings don't go away. They just explode, or we push them down further with alcohol and drugs, but they still eventually explode. Like the image of combat sports is people think violence, but actually martial arts is about human betterment. It's about becoming the best person that you can be, and you often don't become the best person you can be without some difficulty and some resilience being developed, and some doing hard things and testing yourself in an honorable, respectful fashion. And also, like, evolutionarily, boys and men are predisposed towards aggression. Testosterone is a hormone that makes many boys more aggressive, right?
Mm.
And we're a mix of biological, physiological drivers of behavior on top of like our family history and our genetics, right? If you are like from an adverse environment and you are biologically predisposed to be aggressive, how do you moderate that? Combat sports is a way of taking those natural impulses, steering them into something that builds you up, and then at the same time, in my methodology, using that space to discuss things that really matter. Your physical environment can recreate social norms that lead to harm and explosive violence, or it can change it. You come to my gym, there's like literally a poster on the wall about consent. We do Muay Thai for 15 minutes, then we do a group reading of She Is Not Your Rehab. And dudes are here for it, man. No kid grows up wanting to smash up their missus or abuse their kids or have their kids scared of them. But many of them do recreate the environments they grew up in because no one showed them another way. And my role is helping show boys and men another way.
So you're obviously well-versed in those conversations and very well practiced and brave in having those conversations. Do you see that happening in other gyms like yourself, or are you quite specifically different in the way that you're approaching the balance between the physical adversity and the mental adversity?
Well, not everyone who comes to a Muay Thai martial arts gyms had a messy childhood. First off, most people and most men are not violent, right? Most men are not rapists, sexual offenders, domestically abusive. We have to point that out.
Thank you for saying that.
And most men are aghast at what hits the headlines of their social media feed.
Mm.
Most men would be devastated if their child offended or was offended against and wants to be part and parcel of making a change so that doesn't happen, right? But what does that change look like? That's where we often don't know, right? And so when you say, are most gyms like that? I don't think most gyms have explicit conversations around this is what healthy masculinity is, but I do think that most gyms offer good mentoring systems, perhaps not extrinsically, but intrinsically. No one sat down and talked to me about how to look after my mental health in a gym, or this is what a nonviolent relationship is. But they did say, tune up on time, don't drink, don't eat junk food, go to bed on time, go running. Here's your goals. Here's a whole bunch of like-minded, positive people who have got goals that you will spend time with, which is often a really good thing. That solely by itself won't change someone completely, but I've seen it across the board keep a lot of people out of prison and causing harm. And also, some years back, I did some research for UNESCO and we developed a best practice guide to martial arts as a youth intervention. We found programs, myself and a couple other researchers. It's available online through the UNESCO website. And we found, gyms in Belfast or in refugee camps in Syria and from Syria and all sorts of stuff, like whether it's judo or jiu-jitsu or, favelas in Brazil. We found like really cool programs that help young people achieve what are considered sustainable development goals. So there is like, to your question, lots of like good that comes out of that, even if you're not having the explicit conversations like I am, Although that said, I would actually love I'd love to find funding to run like really good mental health coaching for brief interventions around mental health with, say, personal trainers at Les Mills and every other gym in the country, right? Because you can turn up to a gym and be having me and my girlfriend are breaking up, and then the bro who's like acculturated to sexism will be like, yeah, fuck these bitches, let's just go down to Showgirls, there's heaps of other girls out there, let's party. That's a really unhealthy, sexist, destructive narrative that some men do recreate, right? That man might not be an abuser or abusive, but they have values around masculinity and gender roles that are unhealthy, that mean that don't mean relationships are healthy. You know what I mean? You can have an unhealthy relationship that's not an abusive relationship, And some men don't know how to cope about the stress at home and paying the bills and, fighting with your girlfriend or your wife. Like, that's a struggle for all of us. I struggle with that stuff. It's tough, like being the primary, like, economic provider, trying to spend heaps of time with your kids, trying to be an emotionally available partner and run a business. Like, that's all really tough. That's a tough balance. And our generation is one of the first generations that's trying to hold these two gender roles at the same time, being a nurturing, caring, loving, engaged father, and also be like the dominant economic provider. You know what I mean? And that's quite a tough balance, but I think we're getting there. And the fact that you are interested in having this conversation is like a positive symptom of those changing social norms. But a lot of people still don't have the skills to do that. So how do we help upskill men quite like tangibly? I think that's where a lot of the work needs to lie.
Yeah, and I do agree. I think that there's, as we're sort of saying before this conversation, we pushed record on this conversation, like there is a general kind of lack of male leadership. And I don't know whether that sort of started around that idea with the Me Too movement, for example, which then probably like knocked a lot of those good men off. Like it's pushed things back, and we're definitely seeing changes in terms of the way that, there's more young men out there that are actively staying abstinent because maybe for some of them, they're trying this journey piece of, kind of doing it maybe the way that you're doing it. But also there's a lot of them that are just generally scared because they don't want to be seen as being sleazy or, getting out and just trying things too, potentially for a lot of lack of confidence.
To come back to your point, where do you think the Me Too movement knocked good men off? Because I get what you're saying. I was listening to a podcast with Dr. Gary Barker, who's the head of Equimundo, which is one of the world's biggest organizations around the promotion of healthy masculinities and nonviolent relationships, right? Like, they are OGs and I love their work. And he was in this podcast, he said some boys do have a hesitance about asking out because they're asking a woman out, for example, because they're scared of being seen to be a creep, right? Or you see these sort of like hot take TikTok videos where a young woman is setting up a video camera in the gym and then some guy like inadvertently glances at her. And then she'll like clip that and make him look like a creep when he was just not. Do you know what I mean? There are like extremes of that. And I think that's not helpful for helping healthy relationships. But at the same time, I think we need to be careful that sexual violence and sexual harassment are very real. And while Me Too did have some excesses, that overall it also did help start a global conversation that did help us think about, actually, if I'm the boss, should I ask this young woman who needs a job on a date? Because there's a power imbalance there. Does that make sense?
I guess that's kind of where I'm getting to.
I'm curious to know like what your thinking is.
Yeah, my thinking is more around the idea that, having that argument and pointing it out is one thing. It's sort of like what you were saying about the activist, right? Like being loud and being talkative is one thing, but then where's the action? Where's the training? Where's the support and the kind of going, well, actually, like, where are the men now meeting to have these conversations to go, all right, well, this is actually how I want to treat women better. This is how, and it sounds like the space that you're providing in your Muay Thai gym is exactly that. It's a place where men can go to better themselves, talk with like-minded individuals. It's not down at the pub getting boozy and, as you mentioned before, around, going to the gym and then the bros being like, there's other girls in plenty of other fish in the sea. Let's go down to, the local strip club or whatever, and just get boozed because fuck them. They're the problem. It's not you. You're great. You keep doing what you're doing because I see a lot of my behaviors in you, and we're brothers, and therefore let's go do this together, as opposed to going, oh, actually, nah, bro, maybe like this is the second or third relationship that I've been in where this has happened, and it's been with a different woman. So the common denominator in those relationships is actually me.
Yes.
Where can I go to develop myself? And so in terms of like when I talk about the Me Too movement kind of knocking a lot of men off, it's more around a confidence piece. And I'm not sort of, obviously there's a dichotomy scale there too, right? So there's the one end of the spectrum where there's the people that are just the sleazeballs and people that are hard, and then there's the people that are on the other end that are probably, have always been shy and never asked a girl out and done all that stuff.
So you're saying that the broader climate of Me Too meant that some guys who weren't problematic in their behavior but were reluctant to approach a woman organically and healthily don't anymore? Is that the point?
Potentially.
Yeah.
There's potential for that, because again, it creates a bit of a vacuum, right? Like it's that piece where you can start just pointing the finger, and as you said, like, you can set videos up and you can make things out, and it's also perception, because you don't know what the other person's going to be thinking, and maybe there's a woman there and they do want to have the conversation.
That is an interesting thing. Like quite recently, there have been a bit of a conversation around, I don't know, like it's like lots of things is social media driven, like women in New York who are like, guys never ask me out anymore. I think if I'm understanding your point correctly, some of the excesses of the cultural environment that we're living through, particularly online, where hashtag men are trash or hashtag yes all men, has meant that your regular nice guy who doesn't want to make a woman feel uncomfortable, as you shouldn't, won't approach a woman for fear of being seen to be the creep. Does that make sense? And so we also do have and there is some documentation around this, a growing divide between like men and women politically, and a polarization, whereas men are a little more conservative, women are a little more progressive. And the online environment means that they don't ask each other out anymore, or they'll swipe left and right accordingly. And that means that we're having less offline relationships, real life relationships, romantic relationships, sexual experiences. And that actually is not good for us as human beings. Like humans are designed to date and build families, or
well, even going back to what you're saying there with the biopsychosocial model, it's kind of we have biological drivers. We have hormones that are in there that are telling us to do things, and they want us to get moving, and we're social beings. That's the reason why we're developed as we are, because we've all kind of come down, and everybody, you're going to be the shoemaker, you're going to be the farmer, you're going to be the teacher. We all have certain roles to play, and then if that's not happening because we're living in houses, and it's become so convenient and almost become the norm. And I think kind of COVID has definitely made that happen. It's sped that up for a lot of people. And I was having a conversation with Craig Bollock from Mates Matters. And, we sort of talked a little bit on that in terms of just that level of convenience. Everything's open 24 hours. You don't need to leave your couch if you want to learn. You don't need to leave your home if you want to learn some Muay Thai, because there's something online where you can learn some moves and you can do some stuff. Sure, you're not getting that contact, but in your head, you're going to go, cool, I'm getting this discipline, I'm getting this training. You don't need to go out so much, because everything's at your fingertips.
Yeah, technology has created a massive social isolation for many people.
I do have a question for you on that, just in terms of, because you do a lot of work with youth, right, and going into schools.
Yeah.
How do you see that impacting and with teenagers and stuff?
Yeah, well, where do you start? I mean, a lot of kids, we talk about socialization. A lot of socialization happens online now, and the online environment's not always really healthy. So how do you give kids critical filters and media literacy skills to understand that what they're consuming or listening to actually is really not a good pathway? So there's a lot of attention about, say, the manosphere or looks maxing at the moment, right? I'm not entirely sure about the cultural penetration of either of those things in Aotearoa, New Zealand at the moment, because I don't have strong academic data around it. But in Australia and America, those things are shifting boys' ideas around how to behave, what to believe, a woman's role. in Aotearoa, like 2022, 2023, there was a real like Andrew Tate moment. Now he's definitely fallen out of popularity since he got like deplatformed off the mainstream social media platforms. He's been arrested and charged with like rape and human trafficking. He continues to have like a presence, but he's more of like a reactionary right-wing sort of figure now rather than, I think, cool with young boys as he was. But he still does, when I ask a room full of high school boys, who do you think of when you think of masculinity? He still comes back in the feedback, right? When you ask, like, what's the role social media is playing, like, it can have a negative one. I've had boys, like, argue to my face that Andrew Tate was just joking when he's talking about slapping a woman or raping a woman. Like, oh, that's not, he's not mean it, you know? It's like, boys do consume their these social media figures and ideologies they present, and while many will grow out of them and come to see that they're for them for what they are, there are those who will internalize those values, and when they start finding themselves in their own relationships, that's really dangerous. There are accounts of plenty of female teachers who are told, get in the kitchen, make me a sandwich, off the back of some of this more extreme online masculine rhetoric that is both documented in media and academia, and also I've observed in my own work over the last few years. You know, you don't come to consciousness in a vacuum or a bubble. It's like what's fed to you. And we used to get our ideas from family, friends, magazines, TVs, billboards, but now we all have this high-powered social media algorithm in our back pockets demanding our attention, and some people go down quite an unhealthy narrative there that is cooking them. And
not only that, the algorithm itself is continuing to perpetuate what they're seeing.
Well, they see more and more. Like you see more. You ask me what's the role social media is playing. Well, more and more boys have body image disorders. They have body dysmorphia. They are taking steroids more. Like that's documented. You know, I see that myself just casually going to Les Mills, and you see all these young dudes who are like unrealistically jacked. Like I lift weights 2 or 3 times a week. I have a mid physique, dude. Like I put a lot of effort into looking very average, and like and part of that's because I'm older, but also it's because like it's actually impossible to look like these social media influencers that these kids are looking at unless you're on the gear. But the gear's become normal. Same way girls have had anorexia and bulimia and eating disorders and body image for generations because of social pressures. Boys have there now too, right? And social media is a big driver of that. What I do really worry about, and I know to be true, is the role pornography is having on our young people's perceptions and experiences of sex and sexual experiences. Because you don't have to go to a porn site to experience porn, you know, like kids are sending clips and all through like the social media landscape, and the porn is so ubiquitous that's shifted culture generally, like the lyrics of the music that we listen to the way that people dance, to the narratives in the music that are really pornified, to how people perform online. OnlyFans is now like cool and aspirational for some people, and that means that we've had this real, I don't know, like oppressive notion of sex and sexuality become normal that leads to a lot of harm. We have more and more like child-on-child sexual offending. We have more and more aggressive, violent sexual acts that, you know, if I'm speaking about it in an academic and professional manner, that is gendered, like men perpetrate aggressive, violent behavior and language toward females. That's, you know, porn plays a big role in that. On top of the lack of education around sex, consent, healthy relationships, nonviolence, mutual pleasure. Like people go to look at porn from a young age to learn about how do I have sex, and what porn teaches them is that women like being called sluts and whores and choked and spit on and forced to have, you know, double penetration. That's really normal. That's what they will like. And the female actress, presuming that it's an actress and not an illegally uploaded video, because it happens all the time, is paid to pretend to like being degraded, right? Like that's the narrative. And so young people consume this content through social media platforms and then tend to recreate it. Like that's well documented. So social media is having a really negative impact on those things. And then mental health. You know, like I'm sure you are like me, that when you leave your phone in the car and you go out for 2 or 3 hours with your children, you feel like Jesus is giving you a massage. You know, it's like, oh my God, this is amazing. You feel so good. You feel so good,
One thing
because
I've noticed is like when I'm doing the pickups for my boy at kindy, like I noticed that none, and I need to put this in the group chat for the dads because I reflected on it the other day that none of the dads, or none of the parents, I should say, when they're there picking their kids up, seem to have their phones. And I had that realization that none of us do, and it's actually really cool to be able to do that. And I think, yeah, just that separation piece for us, and maybe we're that generation that will hold that and hopefully be able to pass it on to our kids, because I think that, yeah, there's a lot of kids that are addicted, and we're now also seeing,
and
sort of,
parents.
and their parents, yeah, there's, for us, or for me, it was television growing up, but television sits in a room and you can't take it with you.
Yeah.
So you go outside and you're riding bikes with kids in the neighborhood. But now we're seeing in late teens, kids in their early 20s with Parkinson's diseases or degeneration in the brain because of the level of exposure for social media and the way that it's literally changing the structures in the brain, not just the function or the hormone releases. What do you do as a father? What are you doing in your home to mitigate all of that stuff?
Yeah, I try. I've talked about this sometimes. I have a digital safe in my home. So sometimes
Okay.
I get overtired or I'm really busy with work, but I'll come home from my gym and I don't want to do emails or be scrolling aimlessly in front of my children. I want to connect with them, even if it's just for half an hour to put my youngest to bed. So I put my phone in a digital safe, that I can't access till the morning, just to avoid like the habit of picking it up. When I go out with the kids, unless there's an emergency, I tend to leave the phone in the car. When we go for a walk, leave the phone at home. Just try and be really intentional about it, because there is now enough research that shows that digitally distracted parenting or technoference is fucking up our kids. Like, kids are getting mental distress because their parents have always got like this in between them and the child. Kids are speaking that later in life. Kids are turning up to school with speech impediments because learning how to speak involves looking at, like, say, vowel sounds getting formed, and heaps of parents on their phones. Heaps of parents give their kid an iPad. That's fucking terrible. Like in the UK, we just put out new health advice. A child under 5 shouldn't be on an iPad. Child under 5 shouldn't be looking at the screen for more than an hour a day. My children watch TV, but we're really mindful to try our best to like follow best practice, right? Don't get me wrong. Sometimes they'll watch like a couple hour long movie, right? If we both got work or blah, 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 blah. But I'm really strict about, like, it's Netflix, not YouTube, because YouTube has lots of short form content and YouTube shorts, which are more addictive, but also like damage your attention spans more. Like, short form content's the devil, dude. Like, don't let your kid look at that stuff. That's not me being self-righteous or judgmental. That's objectively evidenced research. That's the flick, 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 flick that destroys an attention span, that destroys a child's like emotional regulation.
How old are your kids?
3 years old and 12 years old.
So with the 12-year-old, obviously they'll be getting into college soon.
Yeah, next year.
Yeah. So have you guys had conversations with that? Because I know for many parents or many families, like, that's kind of that age where social media pressures, or, friends,
Yeah.
my friend's got this, and we were the same, right? But I had Snake on my phone. It was at the age of 15.
He's not allowed social media till he's 16. That's just the rule. And that means that he obviously is at odds with his peers, but he's a great kid and he's really intelligent and he understands by and large. Like, he's allowed to play some like computer games and stuff, and we're not like Amish. We're not like locking him in the basement and telling him to go pull a car, but we just know that it's terrible for him. More exposure to people, like, oh, you need to give your kid like access to the world, but you're giving the world access to your kid. Excuse me, I was plugging in my computer. People seem to forget that when you let your kid go to bed with an iPad, you're keeping them up late at night. They're getting sleep deprivation. They're being exposed to sexual predators. They're being exposed to, inappropriate sexual content, like all sorts of stuff. Sorry about this. My computer needed charging.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, I'm more than happy for that. I mean, I've talked to parents who are like, yeah, my child was getting groomed by like a sexual predator in Australia who was trying to come here, sexually abuse him. That happens. Kids should not be looking at beheading videos. Kids should not be looking at ISIS torture videos. It should not be looking at people get killed in the war in the Ukraine. That actually happens all the time. Like, it's super viral. I've talked to children who are 13, 14, 15 years old who are like, I can't get this image out of my head. It was just get sent around the group chat. Parents have no idea. It's like, dude, like, raise your kids or the internet's going to raise your kids. And so, yeah, I know I probably sound pretty hardcore, but that's the reality of it. That is the reality of it. Do you want your children looking at like porn and war and being bombarded with advertising for like gambling or not?
Well, that is it, right? Part of being the father and being the dad is around setting those boundaries and having that place, having those rules in place to form good connections and ensure that your kids are safe in the world.
100%. Like, I talk to teachers, right? Like, I do professional development for teachers around that sort of stuff, or principals, right? I spoke at the New Zealand Secondary Schools Principals Conference, I think this year or last year. And they will uniformly tell me that parents seem to outsource responsibility to devices. They don't want to be the bad guy. It's like, yo, dude, it's not your kid, your job as a parent, not upset your child. It's your job to set boundaries and like hold those boundaries, even if it's difficult. And it's hard. Don't get me wrong. Like, sometimes I'll cave and be like, all right, you can have another ice cream. I don't know, whatever it might be. But when it comes to like tech, I'm really strict about it.
Yeah, cool. Just in terms of becoming a dad, obviously with your upbringing being quite
Dysfunctional.
just thank you. Yep. Did you always want to be a father?
No,
Was that
I never wanted to be a father. I never had a desire to be a father.
so? How did finding out you were going to be a dad impact you?
Well, I actually am a stepfather first. So I met my wife and she already had a son who was 3 at the time of our, courtship. And so it was quite a big life change for me because I'd been, I'd been single for a few years and dating and, long-term relationship, some dating, blah, 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 blah. And then all of a sudden I like really fell for a woman who had a child. And so I had to do some rapid growth, which continues. Like, being a stepfather is different again to being a biological father, I've learned. And then, we weren't trying to have a baby, but Claire got pregnant and it was quite a shock to both of us. But I was like, yo, this is sick. I'm 100% down for this journey. And it's been a lot of learning and unlearning. And I'm always having to figure out how to do things better. Yeah, I really love it. I was truly wrong about parenting. I thought it would take away from life, but it actually augments life in a way that's inexplicable to explain unless you actually do it. I see these conversations are like, oh, kid free, yay. I'm like, cool, that's cool. That's cool. You don't have to like sacrifice the time. You can put your money wherever you want. You can go wherever you want. But there's literally no bigger feeling than watching your child get born. There's literally nothing more satisfying than watching your kid learn to speak or walk or help you want to make pancakes. Like, that
Learn how to
is,
kick a ball.
yeah, to cook a ball or like put a Barbie's clothes on or whatever it might be, right? Like, that's amazing. Like, I've been a prize fighter and I've fought on TV in Thailand and I've climbed Machu Picchu and I've hung out with prime ministers and I've met fuckloads of rock stars and rap stars and had a pretty out of it life. And like, literally being a father like surpasses all of that.
Can I ask, being a stepdad, like sort of stepping into that, is his dad still in the picture?
Yeah, he's got a really good dad. Really good dad.
How was that entering into that for you?
Yeah, it's a weird one. It's like, oh, weird. I'm hanging out with my girlfriend's ex and we're having Christmas together, like, it requires just maturity. Requires you to lean into being like a better man, a better version of yourself. Because you could be real petty about it and like immature about it. Most of us have exes, right? And sometimes our exes meant that we have children, particularly when you start dating later in life. Like, I see all these creeps on the internet who are like, never date like a woman with a kid, like these like manosphere influencers, these incel red pill fucking losers. Not to be judgmental, we should talk with some compassion and kindness, but like, some of the advice they put out there is gross, It's like, yo, if you love a woman and want to take on the responsibility of raising the children, or if you love a man, and you want to take on responsibility raising children, whether you're gay or you're a woman, like, that's a really big deal. And if someone trusts you to raise their kids with them, that's amazing. That's actually that's like really, really noble. And it's hard. It's definitely hard. It's not for the faint-hearted sometimes, because there's these extra dynamics that you have to navigate. How do you parent cohesively? How do you have the same values? How do you navigate when your current partner and the ex-partner have some sort of dysfunction, you know? But, you know, you grow and you learn and you become a better person through the journey if you are open to it. If you want to stay stuck and small-minded and bitter, or you just aren't up for that, you want an easier ride, you don't have to do it. But if you decide to start a relationship with someone who has a child, then, open your mind up and it'll open your heart up.
Yeah, because I'm in a co-parenting relationship at the moment with our son, and that's definitely something that I'm considerate of is that time when my boy's mum finds another partner.
New partner, yeah.
And then I'm sitting there going, well, okay, well, how do we have that conversation? Obviously, I'm my boy's dad. Nothing's going to take away from that. She's going to have a partner. I want her to have a partner. I hope that they're happy and fulfilled. But then there is an element of how do I have that conversation with another man to kind of is now there's two male role models, kind of going, all right, how do you might have some different ideas around screen time than me, but actually this is my son and these are the rules here, or is it oh no, that's happening at your dad's house, but at our house these are the rules here, having those conversations.
It's just like any relationship, bro. The secret to it being better is communication. It's like, yo, what's up, new future boyfriend and mom? Can we make a time that's not reactive off the back of something bad to set some baselines so we have like cohesive parenting? Like my wife and her ex, really great at that. Like they're really good about discussing things, and I really admire that. That takes a lot of intentionality, And I guess you are a really thoughtful dude, Tom, and I'm sure you're more than capable of that. It's like, it is weird. There is like this kind of socialized, maybe jealousy or weirdness about that I think can come up for some men, but just you have to work to overcome it for the betterment of your child. Like your child is going to look back one day and discuss how you raised them with strangers that you'll never get to defend yourself to. Yeah, but they will, like they're going to be 25 one day and 35 and they talk about this sort of stuff. If he can be like, yo, my dad was my dad, and then I had Frank, who was my stepdad. You know what I mean? Like you're never going to, if you're doing your job right, your girlfriend's future partner or your ex-girlfriend's future partner isn't going to supplant your role. He's just going to like be adjacent to it. And you want that for him. Like it does take a village to raise a child. And if he's a good man, he'll teach him skills that you might not have, or show him things that you might not be able to, and that's cool, you know what I mean? And I think that's the best we can hope for, two good men doing the best that they can to be a good influence on the life of your son.
Just quickly on that, do you have any advice for sort of stepdads out there, or even the biological father who is about to meet the potential stepdad?
Well, I'm not an expert on parenting, so take it with a grain of salt. This is more experiential than academic or professional knowledge. But, it is different. I was on a plane yesterday and I sat down next to a young man and we got to a chat. He's got like 4 kids or 3 kids, 2 of them who are stepkids, plus his biological children. And it is different. Like there is a difference in how you feel emotionally. And we both got to the point where it's like, you love them the same, but differently, because you don't necessarily have that biological attachment. You haven't been through watching the baby grow, or you weren't there at the birth or whatever, right? And that's okay to acknowledge, but it's still love and it's still awesome. And it's still a cool responsibility to shoulder. It's not a burden, because you do hear these horrible abusive situations where a new parent, a new partner turns up and then starts trying to get rid of the child and ice the child out in between, like, which is gross and really abusive and damaging. I actually had a conversation with a man at a concert the other night who was telling me about that. He said that like his biological father wasn't around and the stepfather was awful, like absolutely awful to him. And it really stuck with me. This guy was in his late 30s. That some men and women go into a relationship with a new partner and let their wounding or their insecurity or their psychopathology make them abusive to like a child. It's a child, dude. It's a child. If you're jealous of a child, go get some help. Like go get some help. Like go see a therapist or a men's group, a proper one, not like a shitty MRA one. Like You know, like, because there are like douchebags on the internet dispensing life advice, which is bad life advice. You know, like some of that red pill online community is really destructive. Doesn't help you be a better man. So advice-wise, like if you feel any of that stuff coming up, go get some help. Read some books. Lots of good books out there, podcasts out there. Find some healthy mentors. Talk to your boys who have stepkids and are doing a good job at it, by and large. And don't be too shy to learn more. I think a lot of the stereotypes of masculinity that we grow up with mean that we keep ourselves kind of self-contained because we don't want to be seen to be weak or not know it all. We're like in control of a situation all the time. No, we all need help.
That's pretty much the purpose for this. It's kind of, my dad's passed away not long after my boy turned 1. So
I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank you. He was not a great role model, and even bad advice is still sort of food for thought, at least. So, this is definitely born out of, people that like yourself that have gone through these things and trying to go, okay, well, yeah, nobody has all of the answers, and we shouldn't. Because as you said
it's
before,
impossible.
Yeah. But we're all going to have different perspectives and shine different light onto things. One of the things that I have in terms of the martial arts, I'm really curious, like for me growing up, you talked before around having that anger and that frustration. I definitely had that as well. I didn't have martial arts. I had sports. I started rowing when I was 15.
Yeah.
But there's a part of me that's like, I always wanted to do a martial art. And
I think didn't you come do some boxing with me once, like some million years ago?
Yeah. I think I came in for a couple of sessions or two.
Yeah.
But that was definitely more stuff that I did, sort of in my late 20s when I'd gone down the PT route, and I was kind of like, well, actually, this is really good exercise and it's great for my body, and I just want to challenge myself and try different things. But there's a part of me that, like, I look at I'm 6'5" and my boy's 3 and just under 3.5, and he's up to my hip already. You know what I mean? So I'm also kind of, and his mum's not a large lady. So there's a part of me that kind of thinks, well, I want to help him develop and ensure that he understands his physical development as well. So I look at martial arts as being a place where potentially that discipline and that understanding of his body and his physicality can come in, so that he doesn't, as you sort of mentioned earlier, like with the guys that don't have that training and they've just got that violence and aggression and they're just taking it out. So with respect to that, are there any particular martial arts that you think are great for young kids? Like, I know I've looked into judo, for example.
Nah, jiu-jitsu, bro. Jiu-jitsu, what's up?
Yeah.
Bro, 100%. Jiu-jitsu is the art des suave. It's like the gentle art. Jiu-jitsu is gnarly, dude. Like, I'm 46. I'm not a young guy, but I'm still pretty strong and pretty fit, right? And I've had a lot of fights through Thai boxing and Muay Thai and, even on the street, right? When I was young and stupid and unhealed. And I'll go to jiu-jitsu as a one-strap white belt and get, like, absolutely dominated by a skinny kid, or like an old guy who's huffing and puffing and clearly not like physically fit, but has a deep technical game. And I'm like, why am I tapping out to this guy who looks like a sack of potatoes? Like, this is, like, it's crazy. I 100% think jiu-jitsu is the best martial art for kids because there's no head contact. It's lots of fun, but it's also genuinely street effective. Like it or not, there are risks in society. Some people are violent, whether you like it or not. Knowing how to defend yourself and the people around you is a good thing. And jiu-jitsu is a really great way of doing that, because it's about restraining people and dominating people and controlling people without explicitly hurting them. Boxing, Muay Thai, that's hitting people. That's hitting people and elbowing people and kneeing them in the head, and it's violent. And I've been like absolutely like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm getting smashed on the ground in jiu-jitsu, right? I think the mix of both, or obviously mixed martial arts, is great if you really want to know how to fight and defend yourself. But jiu-jitsu is a great skill to have. I think it's fun and it gives you body awareness and also does help with the emotional development, right? Like a good jiu-jitsu school teaches you to be a better person,
So, yeah, I know there's quite a lot of people out there that speak that sort of stuff, like Ian Grant, for example, Stephen Biddulph. They definitely talk about boys, especially sort of learning in their development, coming through more through that physical contact and physical push. So is there anything you can say to reassure potentially the mums out there that it would be a bit nervous about getting their kids into martial arts? And is it also different between boys and girls? Like, do you notice the difference?
Well, I've trained great girls. I think girls I have a kids class at my Muay Thai gym. And lots of girls come and have heaps of fun. So I think girls are just as capable and get just as many benefits out of martial arts training, good martial arts training, as boys do. I do, in my experience and my limited knowledge, boys can tend to be a bit more rough and tumble and like rough house play orientated, but not solely boys. Like plenty of girls like doing that sort of stuff too, right? And culture can often be like, no, that's what boys do, not what girls do. Actually, that's what anyone can do. I know some great female martial artists, so we have to be careful to not push girls away from something that's awesome and good for them as a human being because of our gender stereotypes, right? If you're, with the jiu-jitsu school I take my kid to and I go muck around with, there's so many cool young ladies there crushing it, like I think it's a gender neutral sport. And I've rolled with some women who I'm like, you'll crush a lot of dudes, you know what I mean? Like skills pay the bills in jiu-jitsu. And while size and strength do matter, I've met some really talented female athletes who would mop the floor with a lot of, regular dudes, both through Muay Thai and boxing and jiu-jitsu, right? I'm not like a jiu-jitsu expert. I just muck around with it. Like I said, one shot white belt, dude, 46 years old. But I enjoy it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think if you are worried about it, find a school or find a couple of schools and see which atmosphere you like. It's like the Karate Kid. Like some are like, Cobra Kai dojo, and it's like strike first, strike hard, sweep the leg. And others are more like Daniel-san, or like wax on, wax off. You know what I mean? Find the environment that you think is right for your child and talk with the instructors. But in my experience of jiu-jitsu in particular, most schools are great, and they are really good for your kids.
Yeah, cool. Well, Richie, look, as we just start to wrap this up, man, I got a couple of questions for you. In terms of the legacy that you want to leave with your kids, like what does being a good father mean to you now? And what kind of legacy, like if your kids were to look back or even listen to this in, say, 10, 20 years, what would you want them to think about you or have learned from you?
Yeah, I want them to feel their home's a safe space, and that they could always be themselves, whatever they look like, and express themselves however they needed, and that they don't have to spend a lot of their years unpacking the emotional damage of their formative years. Because I've had to, and a lot of my friends have had to. And my shit's not the worst. I know people who have been like literally like sexually abused by family members or seen their mum get fucking murdered like that, and like that is an extreme example, but like I literally know people who like that. And so like for my kids, I just want how I am and how I grew up to just be so foreign and atypical for them, and it already is, in many ways, like there's no violence in my or alcohol or drugs or police visits in their childhoods. I still can be moody and grumpy when I'm stressed or tired, like a lot of us, so that's something I'm working on. But again, how that manifests is never like explosive or destructive, Sometimes I can snap and be like, go to bed early, or whatever. But I apologize if I feel like it's inappropriate. I take ownership of that and show that humility, which I think is a good lesson for kids to see, Sometimes I can be grumpy with my wife. And again, like if I feel like I've been grumpy or short or sarcastic, I apologize. It's all we can do. None of us are perfect. So I want my kids to know all of this. And I like to think they already do, My kids feel safe in a way that many kids don't. I put on Instagram yesterday, like when I pick up my son from daycare, he's like, let's get ice cream, Daddy. And I'm like, okay, we'll walk there. And he falls asleep on my shoulder. And the fact that his little nervous system feels so safe that he can fall asleep in my arms is letting me know that I'm doing something right.
Yeah, that's great. What's the most rewarding part about being a dad for you?
I don't know, man. Like, it's all rewarding, even the hard stuff. Like, whether my stepson or my son, like, it all makes me a better man. Like, I guess I'm always trying to be a better person. And I used to do that through combat sports. And then I used to do it through like advocacy, activism, and the work I do now. But ultimately, I think like being a father has forced me and encouraged me to continue to have a curiosity for why I am the way I am and explore the bits that need work. And so that's really rewarding because I like to think that the work I'm doing on myself gives both of my children a head start, I'm not like financially rich, like we're all right. My kids don't go want for anything, but I'm not going to leave them like a trust fund probably, but I will leave them the ability to understand their emotions and be kind and empathetic and respect women and respect themselves. And I think in many ways that's a good inheritance.
Richie, that's really awesome, man. This has been, I'm feeling really inspired by the conversation here and kind of keen to get some sort of martial arts into my life on a regular basis as well.
Well, Team Hardcore Thai boxing is always open to you.
Look, if you have a franchise in Wellington, man, I'm here for it.
Are you in Wellington?
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. Well, maybe one day.
Yeah, no, definitely come up for a visit, man. Speaking of, so where can people find you if they do want to come in and learn the martial arts?
Martial arts, I'm based in Greenland, Auckland, but public speaking, education, and consultancy-wise, I travel wherever you want. So, yeah.
And you don't just do schools, you do organizations?
All sorts. I've worked with like government organizations, professional organizations, I've spoken to lawyers, I've spoken to the military, like all sorts of people. Anyone. Yeah, I do professional development work these days because I've been in this space for so long and, share to them these concepts and with, people who are working with young people, So if you're interested, get in touch. I've got a website, richiehardcore.com. hello@richiehardcore.com is my email. My social handles just @richiehardcore. Always do my best to get back to anyone who gets in touch. Or I have an agent, Kate at Say Soul. You're more than welcome to check her out too. Get in touch that way.
Fantastic.
Thanks for talking with me, man. Appreciate it.
Brother, thank you very much for talking with me and appreciate the conversation and the back and forth as well.
Yeah, cool.
Keep doing what you're doing, bro, and I look forward to seeing you and having you on again.
Okay, cool. Okay, Tom. Thanks a lot for that.
Right on.
Okay, bye.